Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for waking up so early on Sunday to see our talk, the project Ludus and how to use Honeypot smartly to secure your home router. My name is Ondřej Lukáš. I'm a student of Faculty of Electrical Engineering and also a researcher in cyber security part of Artificial Intelligence Center of Faculty of Electrical Engineering, the Stratosphere Lab.
And I'm Kalin Ivanov, and I am a bachelor student at the Faculty of Electrical Engineering, and I have been working with Ondra here on this project that we will talk about. I'll talk a bit later.
Thanks. So, few words about the Stratosphere. We are a part, as I was saying, of the AI Center of Faculty of Electrical Engineering. We focus on research in cybersecurity, analyzing malware, reversing malware, threat analysis, and so on. So if you want to check more our project, here is a website. Go and see what else we do. Now, what's ahead of us today? First of all, we will talk a little bit about why we started Project Ludus, what's the motivation, what are the goals. Then we will focus a little bit on honeypots, because that is a key part of the project. Later, I will describe how the interaction between the defender and attacker can be modeled as a game, and what is the benefit of doing so. After that, I will show what is the reason we are trying to bring more users together to help each other, protecting their devices. After that, Colin will tell you a few words about our security metric, which we designed to estimate the quality of our strategies and also to estimate the level of security of the individual devices. And finally, in the end, we will put everything together and show you how you can use it in your devices at home, what our tool can do, and how you can benefit from that. All right, so let's get started. The motivation for our project, well, it started as a collaboration between the faculty and CZ.NIC, which I'm sure you know. They are the creators of the amazing Omnia routers, and they do a lot more. So I'm sure you've visited their talk yesterday or maybe the one today. The project is funded by the Technological Agency of Czech Republic, which we are super grateful for. And we started with an analysis of how honeypots are useful and how, if there is a way, we can make them even better, right? If we can use more of their potential. So the first step was to model the behavior of the attacker as a game, and to use this knowledge to actually help us make our defense strategies better and make our tools better and overall increase our security. Now, it's important to say that we are focusing on the attacks coming from the internet, so we are not focusing on the cases when you have an infected device in your network. We are purely focusing on incoming traffic. And another part of the project is, as I mentioned before, some metrics that would help us analyze and determine whether we are successful or not, or if we are better off with our strategies than we were before. Right? So those are the key goals. Now let's jump right into honeypots. Show of hands, please. Is anybody here in the room using honeypots at home, at work? Oh, we have quite a few. Thanks. So for those of you who didn't raise your hands, speed through of honeypots. So what is it, a honeypot? Well, short story, it's a trap. It's designed to convince the attacker that this is something worth attacking. It can be physical device, it can be virtual, it can be a simulation of a service. There are literally tons of types of honeypots, so well, anybody can choose. But we are focusing on determining or distinguishing the honeypots based on the level of interaction. So an example of low interaction honeypot can be a Tarpid Labrea, which is super simple. It's cheap, which means that, not that you would have to pay for that, but it's cheap to maintain it, to deploy it, to analyze the data from it, etc. So that is a great benefit. But low interaction honeypots have a downside. Mainly, they provide you with quite a few information. So basically, you get the basic information about the attacker, the source, and where they target, but that's pretty much it. So if you want to know more about the behavior of the attacker, of the course of the attack, of some maybe motivation behind the attack, well, this is not enough for you. And for a rational attacker, those simple honeypots are usually quite easy to detect. So, well, if you, for instance, were interacting with such honeypot, it would take you very few seconds to realize that something is going on, and this is not a real service or device. On the other hand, high interaction honeypots provide you with lots of information. An example might be a simulation of databases or SSH, which can monitor the whole session of the attack. So you get not only the basic information about the attacker, but also the proceedings of the attack. So you have a lot of data, well, which is a benefit. But on the other hand, well, you have to analyze it, which takes a lot of time. And then if you don't analyze it, there's no point of having the data because you are not using it to improve your security. Now, those are pricey to deploy, meaning that, well, usually you need someone which would take care of them, who would analyze the data, and also they usually use a lot of resources. So if we are aiming to run our tool in home routers, in small devices, well, we cannot afford to deploy a lot of those because we would basically kill the device, right? So we have to be very careful in choosing the right set of honeypots. So we would have a wide range, and also we would keep, well, we would not use all the resources. Which means that in Ludus now we use 3 types, which is the tarpit, which basically tries to prolong the connection as long as possible and stall the attacker, keeping him in the honeypot and preventing him from attacking other services. The most advanced honeypot we use at the moment is it's a honeypot as a service. It's a product of CZ.NIC, which is great in the fact that it just redirects the traffic from your fake SSH to the server of CZ.NIC, which means that you are not actually running the honeypot, which saves your resources. That is great. And the third honeypot we are using right now simulates telnet, but it's very basic. It just logs the credentials, and that's pretty much it. The great thing of Ludus is that it's easily extendable, which means that if you have your favorite honeypot, if there is a new one, you can plug it right in. It's super easy, which means that we are not fixed in this set of 3, but we can go crazy if we choose so. So those are the honeypots in Ludus. Now, of course, using honeypots has a downside. Well, first of all, we need to decide where to deploy them, right? This seems like a simple question, but it's not, because you want to, in order to capture as many attackers as possible, you need to put it in the right place, especially if you consider that you have a limited number of honeypots you can actually open in order to make, to not use all resources of your device. Now, that means this deployment or the strategy that people usually use is static, because they deploy it and then that's it. No one wants to move it around every other day. No one wants to go through all the pain of changing it. So it's static, and therefore for rational attacker, it's predictable. Now, this is something we are hoping to change, and this is number one, and also the fact that we will decide basically for you where to put them, right? So those 2 problems disappear with Ludus. Now, another reason why people usually choose not to use honeypots or are afraid to use honeypots is that they think that opening a honeypot next to a real service will bring more attention or more attacks towards your real service. And this is a common belief, let's say. Well, guess what? We tried it, we tested it, and it didn't work out. We were not able to force people attack more our real services when opening honeypot next to them. Actually, we are writing a paper about it, so stay tuned for that. But long story short, well, it was not working for us. So this is my honeypot speed through, and let's get right into the game theoretical part, which basically is the core of Ludus, because we have the tool, we have the honeypot, and now we are trying to find out where to put it and how to use them, so we are better off than without the strategies. So in order to use game theory, it's basically a toolbox. So if we can model the problem as a game, we can benefit from all the tools that game theory provides us with. and it can help us finding the optimal strategy. So first of all, we have to start with modeling the behavior of the attacker. Now, this is a very simple example, what we did. Basically, we were trying to find out what does the attacker do if they attack multiple targets, right? So if they just attack one target and go through all the options, all the services the owner runs in that particular device, or if they try one exploit, let's say, or one type of attack, and go through everything. Well, we tested this in the university network. We have data from like 3 years, so that's a quite big example. And what we found out is that the majority of attackers, they stick to the one port, one target, one type of attack, and they try it in everything, right? You can see in here that in this small point, 95% of the attackers were placed. So naturally, this is the type of attacker we are focusing on, because we want to maximize our gain. Now, let's get a little bit deeper in the game theory. So as I was saying, we are trying to model the interaction as a game, and the goal, the optimal outcome for us is a strategy, which means that we will tell you a probabilistic strategy where to put your honeypot. Now, the criteria in this case is to minimize the attacker's utility. And also save our resources. As I was saying, we cannot deploy honeypots everywhere because we would kill the devices. So we have to be careful in choosing where to put them. And that's part of the optimization in the model. Now, this is a very simple model of the game. At the beginning, the attacker chooses a probability for each port that this port would be attacked. And in this simple scenario, we have only 2 ports, but as you can imagine, in real life, there is a lot of them. Now, after that, there are 2 options. If the attacker attacks a real service, they gain the utility, and they can attack again, maybe in different port, in the same device, or move somewhere else. Well, if they hit the honeypot, they are detected, and then for us, the game ends. So that's the end of the interaction. Now, in the bottom of the slide, you can see the formula, how we compute the utility for the attacker. That's the part we are trying to minimize. But, well, this is not the complete model of the game. If we move forward and we bring more devices into account, you can see that our example grew a little bit bigger, but it's still very simple. We have 2 devices. One of them has a production port. That's how we call the real services. If you run a SSH, web page, whatever you have, we call them production ports. The first one, defender number 1, has a production port in port 22, and the other guy has a production port in port 80. Now, each of them has an option to open some honeypots, and the question is, which one should they choose? Down in the slide, there is the attacker's perspective, so you can imagine how the choosing of the honeypots will affect the perspective of the attacker. Now, in this case, if guy number 1 opens a honeypot in port 80, and guy number 2 opens a honeypot in port 22, what it creates is a so-called information set, which is a part of the game in which the attacker cannot distinguish in which precise node of the game he is or the game is, and therefore they have to choose more conservative strategy, which means they have to be careful, and usually this brings less utility to them. So this is something we want to do. Now, again, down in the slide, you can see that for attacker, those two targets are, he's not able to differentiate them. Now, if we add one more guy into the equation, which by luck has no production port, so he can open 2 honeypots in our small example, it even makes the situation for attacker worse, because now there is a chance that when randomly choosing one of the 3 yellow boxes, which are the targets, there is a bigger probability that the attacker will hit the honeypot. So the attacker has to be even more careful to choose the targets. So that's like slowing it down and makes the whole outcome of the game worse for him. All right, so this is a super simplification of the game. Of course, in real life, there is a lot more ports. Actually, you can see the number of actions per rotor, so the game tree is huge. And in fact, it's so big that it's not very easy to compute it. So we had to came up with some simplifications. The first one is we turn the game into zero sum, which means that the utility of the attacker is equal to the loss of the defender. Obviously, this is not the case in real life, but for the sake of the simplicity and for making the model and the game solvable, this really helps. And also, we focus on the limited number of port combination. This means the honeypot port combination. So if there is in real life, if you have a user which uses a weird port combination, which we did not account for in the game model, well, we solve it by choosing the nearest neighbor that we counted for in the model. So this is something which makes the game a lot easier, actually. So easy, well, so easy that we can compute it with a linear program, and it can be solvable in polynomial time with respect to the size of the game, which is still big, and therefore we are not solving the game in each individual devices, but we are solving it in our server and then just deploy the strategy to the devices, which means that we save all the computation from the small and possibly the devices with less resources. So this is a simple introduction to the game, and now we will move to how do we measure the quality of our strategies and the state of the devices, and that's something Colin will tell you.
Yes, thank you. So yeah, I will talk a little bit about how we actually see what this looks like in real life. We want to make sure that our strategies work and that we're actually seeing some improvement in the security of the routers. So we devised a few different metrics to measure what we perceive as the security or different aspects of the security of each router. So we have a few different metrics because there are different important aspects that each one highlights. So overall, we wanted to measure the effectiveness. We wanted to get some feedback based on the metrics of the actual strategy, and also compare that to other methods. And because there are so many different kind of goals, we needed to have different metrics to explain those. But we still managed to look at the data and collect the data, and we will look at how this looks like in a Kibana visualization. You can see it online, actually. If you want to scan that QR code, you will see the dashboards online. And those dashboards include some of this data that you see on this slide, but are visualized in graphs. This is mostly packet metadata, like the size of each packet, the number of packets in each flow, which ports were attacked, what were the source IP addresses of the attacks. And also we used Suricata, which is an open source tool that gives us the alerts of each flow. So for example, if Suricata measures a certain malicious activity like bad traffic or denial of service or something like this, it will notify us and it will give us that alert in the visualization. So we can actually look at some of that right now, right here. So here we have one of the dashboards, which is for the IP address information. The big flow, it's called a Sankey chart on the left there, shows certain IP addresses and which ports they attack on the right side. So that's one of the things that we gather from all this data. We see top IPs that generate alerts. Those are the bar charts on the bottom there. So this all helps us analyze and see exactly what is going on in the whole network and all of the routers that we have Ludus installed on. And we have all kinds of information. We have, for example, geolocation information, of all the IPs. Again, we have the different alerts. Here you can see some of the alerts. And again, this is real data from the routers. We worked with about 9 routers for most of the visualizations here. So we have a few data points that we can actually say that it's real data and that our strategy is being this effective. So yeah, here you can see, for example, we have data in time because the way that we collect the data is in timestamps. So that's important because we want to be able to monitor, for example, if an attack is currently going on or if it's dropping, if a certain IP address is attacking for a long period of time. We want to be able to tell all this kind of information for our analysis. Here you can see some of the other packet data, like ports and whether the port was honeypot or production port or what the protocol was. Yeah, so this is, again, you can check out all of this data. It's in real time on this. Oops. Do you have like a shortcut? You can scan that QR code and actually see what's going on. There are different dashboards there. One's for alerts, one's for IP addresses, a summary dashboard that shows overall information, kind of summarizing the most important aspects of everything. And this is public, so any researchers that want to download this can and use it for their own research, or users of Ludus can compare their own what's happening in their own router, which I will show next, to the global picture. I also want to stress that this data is completely aggregated and anonymized. What that means is we cannot actually trace back any of the data that we collect to certain individuals. It's completely anonymous. And aggregated, it means it's just combination of everything. So you cannot actually see these, like the flows that show like packets and the protocol for one flow. You cannot see like per flow. You can see sums of everything. And yeah, and just to show then the local visualization. So this shows this is actually running live as well. This is Ondřej's router here, and it's in his house. So we can see actually we restarted it right before this presentation, and we can see that there's actually attacks going on against him right now from the Netherlands. Apparently, some are unknown, some are from Russia. So we found out that actually we're getting attacked all the time, even in a home network. So yeah, this is what each individual user having Ludus would see. Number of attackers, numbers of alerts. This has been going only for like 20 minutes, and already we have 20 attackers. So an attacker per minute, it seems like. Yeah, so we also see some of the other information that's also available for the global picture, which are total bytes and alerts over time going on, as well as some more detailed information about the whole Ludus system. So this is yeah, this just shows how the whole Ludus system works, and I will talk about more about the external security measure next. So as I mentioned with the data, yeah. As I mentioned before I started talking about the data, is we want to actually measure the security. So there's no, in practice or in academia, there really isn't a measure of the security itself, like the risk that the router has at any given time, how it's susceptible to attack, or how secure you are at any given point in time. So that is what we try to calculate here. This is kind of a simplified risk formula. However, we did some experiments and we found that it's actually reflects a pretty good picture of what is going on. It is based on just simple expected value of loss, and that's the risk that you see, the top equation there is just the risk is an expected value of the loss function, and the loss function is calculated given data that I showed before from Suricata, giving the alert categories and signatures, as well as the bytes and unique IP addresses. And we also have some weights that we use to make the calculation. We have other metrics that are more pertinent to our specific strategies. For example, we wanted to really measure the honeypot to production port ratio, which is the graph on the right side that you see there. It shows that, for example, more attacks are happening on the honeypots, which is what we want. We want the attackers to spend as much time as possible in the honeypots and not in the production ports. We also have other metrics measuring entropy and combinations of different specific measures. And each of those gives us a different picture of the security in the router. And again, all of those are available on the public Kibana, so you can see, you know, how are you comparing to the global picture? Are you being very insecure right now? Are there many attacks going against you right now, or not? You know, you can see that using this. So we wanted to validate all the metrics that we used. And for that, we devised a few experiments. We actually acted as an attacker on our own devices that we have. We have a few routers in our office that we just attacked a bunch. We controlled for things like amount of data that we send, attacking from different IPs, controlling the severity of the attack. So for example, port scanning versus brute forcing versus different levels of severity for each attack. And we attacked multiple routers, as I said. It was good that we had a few different routers because this gives us not just like the picture of one single one, but we can compare across devices, which was very useful for us. And the insights that we get from these can tell us, again, like anomalies. It can help us identify certain points in time or certain points in space. So for example, if a certain attacker is attacking all different routers, let's say on our system, we can see that this is a spread out attack. We can identify that using this. Also, we can use kind of an identification. So for example, in this, the two graphs that you see there show two different routers being attacked at the same time. And one of them has a much lower risk than the other one. This is logarithmic scale, by the way. So we can see that it is definitely the bottom one has a much lower risk at 1, around 1 is the average, and the upper one has a risk of 3. And we can see the deviations from the mean, and that will tell us whether something very crazy is happening at any given time. So that is very useful for us to be able to identify. And again, there's the QR code if you want to scan that. Yeah, so now we will talk about a little bit about the Ludus tool itself, like the overall picture. And we designed the whole system so that it is like a control loop, like a feedback loop, so that first of all, we gather all the data. Ludus calculates its strategy. It applies the strategy. We get the data into the database, and we apply those visualizations and the external security measure that I talked about and all the different metrics. And based on this, we determine how successful we are. And that gives us the ability to design better and improve the system, and and really work on controlling everything. And maybe Ondra will talk a little bit more about the Ludus system itself, as in the installation and all the details.
Thanks. So I wanna just, we've already talk about how do we compute the strategies and how do we measure. Now you might be wondering, what do we analyze in the first step? So the input for our strategy is which production ports you are using in your devices. That means which services you run, and this is something we need to know in order to find the optimal honeypot placement for your particular device. And in fact, those are actually the ports that we want to protect the most, right? The real services is something you want to keep the attackers away from. And as Kalin was showing before, if we can force the attacker or persuade the attacker to attack the honeypots instead, that's great for us. So what we do, we analyze the IP tables of your device and find out which ports are used for running services, and those are excluded for the potential honeypots for once, and also based on that we compute the strategy. Now, I already mentioned that the strategy is not computed in your device, you are just using it, and I want to say one more thing in here is that you are, even though all the users use the same strategy, it does not mean that all of them will open the same honeypots, because it's based on probability and also, as I was saying, on the real services that you run in your device. So we can deploy one strategy for everybody, but then because of the randomness and also the different setup of individual routers, each of the router will end up with different honeypot set that is being opened at any given time. About the reporting, so at the moment we use the infrastructure of CZ.NIC, so all the data is stored in their database. So if you are a lucky Omnia or Tourist router user, an owner, you already probably sent some information to CZ.NIC, so this is just an extension of that. It's the same rules apply about the security and anonymity and etc. Now, key features of Ludus. So it's fully automated. I was mentioning in the beginning that one of the problems with using honeypot is that people don't want to take care of them, right? So our system does that for you. From the analysis, where to put them, how to open them, you can just go to your local visualization website and see what's going on without all the pain of actually analyzing the data and going through the logs. So this is one thing. It's adaptive, which means that if you install it, start it, and then you decide you want to use a new service, well, it's okay. We will just adapt to your needs. So in every iteration, the user scans it, the tool scans the setup. So if there is some change, we will just adapt to that, apply a new strategy, a new rollout of the strategy, and go on. Now, well, we have designed the reinforcement loop or the improvement loop. So hand in hand with that, there goes the update of the strategy. So if we come up with a new strategy, which is improved based on the feedback, it will automatically get it. So you don't have to check, the forums if there is a new strategy, or if there is something new, it will happen for you. One more time, the data that we collect is anonymous, so we cannot trace back the users which are sending it. And also, well, you can go and see. I actually encourage you to go and see our awesome visualizations. There's plenty of data there, and if someone wants to help us with the analysis, go there, check it out. If maybe you will find something which we were not able to do, so, and that would be great. Now, how to get Ludus? What do you need to do? Well, if you are like an owner of one of those, it's very easy. You just update it to the new, to the latest version of the OS, and you just use the package manager to install it, start the tool, and you're good to go. Now, right now we support only the devices from CZ.NIC, but we are working really, really hard to make this happening to all OpenVRT routers. So if you have some little bit more powerful router at home which runs OpenVRT, soon you will be able to get our tool and check it out. On the other hand, if you don't have Omnia or Tourist right now, well, you still might be lucky and be able to run this. You can go to check out Git. If you manage to run it in your particular device, please let us know in the email that I showed before, and I will show again. We would be super grateful if people tried it in their own devices. Everything is written in Python, so it should be quite easy, but we still, as I was saying, this is something which is experimental. We are working on it right now. Right, so what's coming in the Ludus project? Well, as I was saying, first and top priority right now is to make it happen for any OpenVRT device. Of course, we want to make better strategies. This is something which is done iteratively, so it will take some time, but we are doing that. Blocking module is something which is very important because if we are able to block the attackers based on the information we are getting from the honeypots, it's actually something which makes the potential attacks for the attackers much more costly, because right now the only cost for the attacker is that actually they spend some time in attacking the honeypots, and maybe that their IP will get in some database or some register. But let's be honest, that's not much. So if we are able to block them among all the users of Ludus, that brings a really high cost for the attacker, and that can even help us doing better in the strategies because it will simplify the game model a bit. So we will be able to compute bigger game trees and make the strategies even better. Well, and of course, as I mentioned before, it's in case of honeypots, the system is extendable. So we would like to work on that. Actually, this is something I'm working on in my thesis, to make a new types of honeypots, so the variety is even wider, and we can every time choose the optimal setup and optimal set of the honeypots that fit the needs of the individual devices. Yeah, so at this point, we would like to thank guys from CZ.NIC that worked really hard and helped us with doing and making this happen. I've mentioned Jans and Vojta, but there were plenty more people in CZ.NIC that worked in this, so thank you to them, and also a colleague of ours, former colleague of ours, Karel Durkota, who's actually responsible for the game model. So he was at the beginning of the project. And also we again we'd like to thank Technological Agency of Czech Republic for funding us. It was great. We actually the project finishes officially this autumn, but of course we will keep on making all the things I mentioned before happen. So we would get better. So once again, if you have some of the supported devices, go and check it out. If you don't, well, we will make sure that you will be able to check it out later on. And now, if you have some question for us, something you would like us to go further and deeper in, please ask. If you have any more questions, here is our contact. So make sure that you reach us. So yeah. If you have a question, just raise your hand. I've been told that I need to repeat it to the recording, so. Sure. All the data is how do you deal with the actionability of the data? Like, for example, I think there is a IP 11111. I would like to know what he was doing with my network, and apply relevant patches and stuff like that, right? Find out what he was doing with the network, and how I can deal with that. Oh, okay. So if there is you are talking about the IP of the attack. Oh, sorry. I should repeat the question. Hold on. Sorry. The question was if there is an attacker with particular IP and he's doing something in my network. How do I know and how can I react on that? Well, the anonymization of the data applies when you are sending your data to us. As for the attackers, well, you can see that you can see all the data that we gather about the attackers. You can see that even in the Kibana in your local visualization. So the anonymization is applied when, for example, for your IP, when you are sending the data to us, we don't know your IP. We only know the incoming traffic. In Kibana, I can see like what commands in case of the Kauri, you would have to use the CZ.NIC website. But yes, you can see, you know your ID because this is something you have, but you are not sharing with us. And based on that, you can go and see the commands that the attacker was using in your recovery. So you can trace this. No, because if we did that, that would mean that we could trace you and your ID back, and that is something we didn't want to do. So you have the possibility. It is described in our webpage how to do that, but we cannot do it for you. You have to go to CZ.NIC infrastructure and check it out for yourself. Is that? Pardon? Okay, so first of all, if there is some sensitive data, we are trying not to send it away, so we wouldn't have that issue. What's in case of the data that we gather, it's basically information about the source of the connections, and then for the flows we use only the metadata, which means the number of bytes and packets, and the target, the destination port of the attacks. You might be wondering at this point, how do we manage to ensure that if someone is sending data, it's not like duplicated or something like that? And for that, whenever you start our tool, it generates a random hash that we use as an ID for the connection, but it's not tied with the ID of the Omnia, for instance. Sorry. ID of the Omnia instance, which means that if you choose so, whenever you restart the tool, it will generate a new one. So basically, for us, it's a new user. It's we cannot trace you back. Sorry, the question was, how do we anonymize the data? I forgot to repeat it. Yeah. If someone is not comfortable asking in English, you can ask in Czech, by the way. Mm-hmm. Okay, the question was, when we are analyzing which services are you running if we are sharing this information. We send back anonymously like a set of production ports, but not the whole IP tables, nothing like that. We aggregate it and send only user X has a production port of 80, and that's it. So again, user X means this random hash that we generate when you start the tool, right? It's not something which would actually be able to identify yourself. Any more questions? Right. So if you come up with a question later, here are our contacts. So you can write us and reach us. We will be around. So if you want to talk later on, we're free to do so. And I forgot to mention at the beginning, we have some stickers. So if you want a cool Ludus sticker, come here and grab some. They are super cool, and they fit right on the tourist routers. So they look amazing there. Right. So once again, thank you for coming so early. Thank you for your attention, and hopefully we'll see you around.